contribution of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and his successors, particularly for us, my Guru Maharaj A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and particularly Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj. The point is that they had extraordinary power, if you will, spiritual power. Krishna Shakti, Vimena Tara Pravarta. Without that, Chaitanya Charitamrita informs us that the successful implementation and spreading of the dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will not be successful. Seems successful overall. All of us are the example of that from the international community. I was fortunate to be part of the fulfillment of the prophecy, one of the prophecies of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who said that there will come a day in the near future when persons from all over the world, from Europe and the United States and other countries, will come on this road. It was later named Bhaktisiddhanta Marg, the only road into Mayapur, and to come together and chant Jai Satchidananda, Jai Satchidananda, Jai Satchidananda. It's a very memorable moment for me. And as we did that in Sankirtan down the Marg from Prabhupada's fledgling as it was at that time, Mayapur, Chandrodaya Mandir temple, just a beginning of the construction. Nothing was complete. Maybe on his residence, he had moved from a straw hut into the first building, and we were housed in the same building. I stayed in the straw hut. Prabhupada stayed in. I had good fortune to do that. But anyway, as we proceeded along the mark, the path, road from the Chandrodaya Mandir to the Yoga Pit, to the birth site of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it was discovered by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and chanted Jai Satchidananda, Jai Satchidananda, and the villagers, local residents, Dambasis, ladies would come out with plates of sweets, and ahead of the Sankirtan, they would place them on the road and bow down and offer the sweets to the Sankirtan. And then they would be picked up, before we, got there, and then they'd be handed out. This was going on as we, such things, another similar type of response to this extraordinary event in Mayapur Dham. So to have taken it all over the world, this is a contribution of our particular lineage within a larger conglomeration community, sampradaya, or dispensation, formal dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the verse, and I like this verse. Since attaining, now remember, it's been preceded by so many things are required for this initiation to be efficacious. Since attaining even one meaning with true preceptors is rare. When one attains their consent, that is a great day for initiation. Whether one is in a village, in the forest, or in a field, or whether it is day or night, when by fate the Guru arrives, when initiation comes by his order, when there is desire for that initiation on the part of the student, following the order of the Guru, a holy place, a vow, a fire sacrifice, a bath, or recitations are never the causes of initiation. It comes only when the true Guru appears by his own will. So with that, I'd like to speak a little bit about the what we refer to as the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. Gaudiya, of course, refers to Bengal, and refers to where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared and where his dispensation was initiated, inaugurated. And Madhva, the other name in this rather long title, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, refers, of course, to the great Madhvacharya, and he's a historical person, as is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And from the historical realm, we go to the mytho-historical realm, and Brahma. So Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Sampradaya. So let's start with Brahma. Brahma is the head, forehead, head, if you will, of our Sampradaya. He's depicted as having four heads, which means he's thought things out pretty well, and among other things. And many of our sacred texts, which there's no shortage of in Hinduism, speak about him, but three texts in particular are pertinent to why it is or how it is that we connect Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lineage that we are all members of with Brahma. Those texts are, of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Shruti. This is from the Smriti. Then, of course, Shruti means that which is remembered. Shruti means that which is heard. Sounds that are in the womb of nature and heard through by introspection and blessing, and then articulated by those who have heard the sounds that are not the origin of them, but who have heard them. We call that the Upanishads. Upanishad. Upanishad means to sit close. The sit close literature. It means that this is not something that the general public will be interested in, first of all, or that they could understand, being preoccupied as they are with going outward in pursuit of their fulfillment in life, which we all feel in need of. We feel some lacking, some need. We feel there is a purpose, and a purpose for ourselves, but what it is, we're trying to find it out, right? But mostly, as I say, the general public looks outward through acquisition. The idea that by acquiring, that which is lacking will be fulfilled, and we will become more. Of course, this pursuit is blind to the fact that we are the more. And the things that we might acquire are less at best. After all, they don't endure. Right? They're here today and they're gone tomorrow, if not the next day. It's magical. It's an illusion that we have something, that we own something. So this pursuit of the fulfillment that we feel in need of through acquisition, this is the preoccupation of most people. But to turn inward and focus on the fact that the only reason that anything out there, if you will, matters, because we think it matters. Matter doesn't matter unless we matter about it, right? So how much more important are we? How much more valuable are we, who give the meaning? We invest meaning in matter, and then we think it's meaningful. We are the fountain of meaning. It means that, well, what's out there, if you will, is quantitative. That which is asking about it, like what's out there, is qualitative. Consciousness. It's a difficult subject to talk about, to explain, to understand. It is the understander. It is the explainer. That we're a little displaced from what we are. And so it's difficult to say. It's a big problem in philosophy and science, and in the world since forever. It's not an old, dusty topic in a dusty book on a shelf that's no longer pertinent, but what's out there and who's asking the question is the only thing life is about. We come up with different answers. What's out there? We kind of forget who's asking the question, and the difference between the two. If there is a difference, what is the difference, and so on and so forth. And so that difference and that qualitative nature of the self and consciousness. Of course, this is the subject of the Upanishads. It says, "Come and sit close, and I'll tell you something, a secret. It's a secret. It's a hidden thing." We are preoccupied largely in the world with exploiting nature for a humanly conceived end, purpose. Right. We learn from the sacred text that it's just kind of common sense. That if you love someone, then they'll share their secrets with you. You love someone, and you'll know. That's the way of knowing. Loving is the way of knowing. So if we approach nature differently, which is of course what the whole karma marg, the path of karma in Hinduism is about, to honor nature, broadly speaking, then through Dharma Jignasa, inquiring as to the nature of Dharma. Dharma here means purpose. What is the purpose of nature in relation to me and so forth? So if you inquire how to conduct oneself accordingly, dharmically, and you proceed to do so as is mandated or suggested, really mandated. If you want to do it, here's how you do in the sacred texts. Then you end up doing things that, well, you're not sure if they make sense. If you come from a culture where that doesn't, it's not part of it. Of course, you ask that question, and I wonder sometimes does it make sense what I'm doing? My mind was there. If you were from India, you probably wouldn't think like that. To go to art teachers. Yeah. My parents used to do that, and their parents did that. So on. But of course, we can give the sense to it, the reason to it, the purpose. Well, the value of trans-rational exercises, and this is not just a cultural affair of India. Every culture has a trans-rational approach to knowing in ways that reason alone cannot afford us. That recognizes the culture that recognizes the limitations of reason, and then pursues a transrational means for knowing, knows more. Right? So it's reasonable to conclude that reason has its limitations in terms of providing an ultimate and comprehensive way of knowing by which I can be fulfilled. We want a perfect way of knowing by which we can become perfectly happy. So we can do the things that will make us perfectly happy. Right? So this is the basic, I'd say, wisdom of the Upanishads. And everybody's not in a teachable moment. They're going 100 miles an hour in the opposite direction. They may, as a result of that, have a cathartic effect and think this isn't working, right? And then a moment may be created, a teachable moment, however it comes about, at any rate. So the Upanishads is a nice term. Sit closely. It means sit closely and I'll tell you a secret. Nature has a secret. Its secret is that it has a soul. And if you want to open that up a little more, it's you. It's us. This is extraordinary, right? So the Upanishads are there to tell us about that. And in a broad way, they say that if you're looking for God, look no further. Look at yourself. That which most resembles God, or your source, let's say, in the world, is you. So consciousness is not like anything. It's not a thing. So God is like that. And a little bit different also, because God, or our source, doesn't find itself or himself in the position that we are in, wondering about himself. Well, he does in higher sense. That's another thing. That is the full face of the Godhead, Krishna. Wondering about himself in existential crisis, in the face of the love of his beloved Radhika. But anyway, we find ourselves troubled in a less charming sense, right? Although we are consciousness, so we were like God, but we're different, right? So, of the texts that we refer to, which Brahma, head of our Sampradaya, and the origins of it are discussed. One is from the Shruti, the Upanishad, Gopal Tapani, one of the 108 Upanishads. Gopal Tapani. Tapani means, tapa means light. It means tapa, austerity. These things go together. As I was saying earlier, if our senses are preoccupied with sense objects, sights, sounds, things to touch, feelings, tactile, speaking, and so forth, the more that our senses are preoccupied with sense objects, the more our introspection recedes to the background. And when our senses are deprived, even involuntarily, of contact with sense objects, let's say you get kidnapped by a terrorist or something, put in a solitary confinement, so you're relatively deprived comparatively. You don't have the internet, your phone is not there. You're deprived. And so what happens is you start to think more, you start to become more introspective, you seek to solve the problem that you're in by philosophizing about it, thinking about it. Those things weren't everything anyway. And it's said that the quality of life does not depend upon really necessarily where you are. It's how you think about it. So therefore, austerity, in terms of meaning tapa, also means light. So it gives light, illumination, insight that will not surface to the extent, or will not surface to the extent that you are preoccupied with this pursuit of acquisition. The Gita says it very nicely. Oh, what is it? Boga Aishvarya, Prasaktanam Teaparita Chetasam, Vyavasayatmaka Bhugi Eke, Samado Na Vidhiyate. Boga Aishvarya. Boga means enjoying the sense objects with the senses, Aishwarya, and the things that you acquire from that appear to make you better off, wealthy, more powerful. I've got a fence now, yeah, large dog, whatever it is, bank balance, Aishwarya, my power, and I can enjoy with it. Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktam Priyapita Chetasam. When one is preoccupied, to the extent to which one is preoccupied, then Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, this one-mindedness that is required for spiritual progress. You only have to know one thing, and it's the only thing that you're looking for yourself. People go to the moon. I've heard. What were you looking for? You should ask. What is the most used word in any language? Let's use English. Okay, but it goes across the board. It's the smallest, one of the smallest words. It's made of one letter. What is it? I. This is the most used word, the most important word. Everyone is concerned with I. What am I? Why am I? That's what we're looking for. Because you're not going to find it on the moon. What am I? And it costs a lot of money to go there, I'm sure. Ask, what's that guy's name? Elon Musk. It's quite expensive. Passage to the moon. But to go in, it doesn't cost anything out there. Right. It's free in that sense. You're free to pursue that. And no one can stop you. No one can stop you. Only you can prevent yourself. And if you turn inward, and this is what Brahma did in Gopal Tapani. Tapani means austerity, and it means light. It means to Gopal Tapani. This text sheds light on Gopal. It's a name for Krishna. We'll have to talk about that. But Brahma, as described in another text, the Bhagavad, which is Shruti Saramekam, it's a Smriti text after what was heard, thinking about it and saying something, although at the same time, it is essentially the essence of all the Shruti. Shruti Saram. Saram means cream, essence of the Shruti. Srimad Bhagavatam and Brahma Samhita. These are three books where Brahma's, as the fountainhead of our Sampradaya, the history of this is described, right? There we find in these texts, all of them, that Brahma is performing austerity. He's engaged in to put it another way, in sacrifice, in foregoing the taking, and giving of himself in an effort to source. And of course, this kind of pursuit, as I say, you're free to do that. And as we do it earnestly, then answer will come in the form of an agent, right? And give light. This is what happened to Brahma. His austerity was really it's further understood as Bhakti itself. Inwardly, anyway, introspectively, he pursued his source, and the source appeared before him in the form of Gopal Krishna. Krishna in Gopal Vesh, dressed as a cowherder. And there, as it's explained in all three of these texts that I'm referring to, Krishna imparted the mantra to him, gave him some advice, and overall, he was informed that what you see now, my form and all that it involves and so forth, will be realized, and you'll have union and relationship with me through the mantra that I'm imparting. So the mantra is non-different than he who has given it, in this case, Bhagavan, or through Guru Parampara. The Guru is giving, means God is giving through the Guru mantra. So the mantra Brahma received, it's non-different from Gopal Krishna himself, right? And as I say, this history, if you will, is played out in the different texts. There's a little difference in the way it's told in each place. It might be a little confusing if one looks superficially at the Bhagavatam, which we're told not to do. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata seva. It's not a book that you read through and go, oh, I read that. You know the story I'd like to tell about what it means to have an education. It was thought in India that father sent his son to Benares to get an education. And he came back and he said, so you got an education, which is a place of learning. He said, yes. He said, what books did you study? I studied this book. And the father said that he was in Vrindavan. Father said, did you study Srimad Bhagavatam? I said, I don't think that was on the list. No. So he said, well, then you don't have an education. So go back to Benares and just study the Bhagavatam alone. Then you'll have an education. So he went and learned the Bhagavatam. Came back and said, Father, now I know why you sent me back. Yes, that book alone is a full education. So Father said, so you understood the Bhagavatam? He said, yes. He said, then go back, study it again if you think you understood. So again, he went back again, he studied the Bhagavatam. He returned a second time. His Father said, so you've understood Bhagavatam? He said, yes, I've understood why you told me to go back the second time. What I thought I understood the first time, but obviously after studying it the second time, I didn't. So now you understand? I said, yes, now I understand. He said, go back to Benares, really study the Bhagavatam again. So bewildered, he went back, he studied it again, he returned. Father said, so did you study Srimad Bhagavatam? Third time, yes. Did you understand? He said, I cannot understand Srimad Bhagavatam. Father said, now you understand Srimad Bhagavatam. It is beyond it doesn't fit between the ears, but it can go into the heart, right? Capture the heart, take you out of your head, and soften. It can cause the head to function in such a way as to soften the heart, if you will. So there, we were told to study the Bhagavatam again and again, not to praise you, but Nityam Bhagavata Seva, again and again, study Bhagavatam. And new meanings and insight will come, right? So from a superficial reading of Bhagavatam, it may appear, for example, that as the description is given, that it wasn't Krishna who appeared and gave the mantra to Brahma, but Narayan, who was his source. But of course, we are saved from that misconception by the work of our acharyas, such as Jiva Swami and Krishna Sandarbha, who's gone into great detail to explain what this may sound like Narayan, but look at this, see the grammar here, see the previous text here, look at this chapter over there. And let us refer as well to Brahma Samhita and to the Gopal Tapani, where it's more clearly presented. So, of course, what's an example of what I'm saying? Well, Atato Brahma Jignasu, right? Janmadyasya Dayadi Tarata Charte Shubhaviknasa. Tene Brahma Vidayadi Kavye. Tene Brahma Vidayadi. It's right in the first verse of the Bhagavatam. Tene Brahma Vidaya. In the heart of Brahma, Krishna, I say, awakened, revealed the essence of what the nature of ultimate reality. What do we find later in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, Brahma Vimohan Lila? There, Brahma is being enlightened by Krishna as to Krishna's tool, Bhagavan. So he the source of Narayan. And if we look at the instructions given by Krishna in the Bhagavatam to Brahma, along with the imparting of the mantra, we find, oh, they're all about Rag Bhakti. It's not something Narayan would be instructing someone about, because it doesn't have anything really to do with him. It has only to do really with Krishna, Goloka. So Brahma was enlightened by Krishna with regard to Braj Bhakti. Later we find him, again we go to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, we find him in the Brahma Vimohan Lila, 3 chapters there, very central to the Bhagavatam. This is the Lila narrative in which the position of Krishna as the fountainhead of all divinity is revealed and explained. And Brahma with his 4 heads, he got it. They were spinning, but he got it. What Krishna showed him, right? There, when Brahma arrived with a plan of his own, he was unaware of the fact that he was actually on Krishna's agenda, and Krishna had brought him there for reasons of his own to further instruct through example Brahma further from what he instructed him at the dawn of creation when he imparted the mantra, to give him some siksha in support of the diksha that he shared with him through the imparting of the mantra. He imparted the mantra, and at that time, there in Bhagavatam, it's explained, Krishna told him, so I bless you, you may have a relationship with me in Sakya, in friendship. So here's God saying that, giving a mantra. What does it mean? How does it work? So after some time, not right away, he didn't give him Siddha Pranali on day 1. He didn't give him instructions and advice that was beyond his level of eligibility. But after he chanted the mantra and he practiced and so forth, in time, his guru, Krishna, appeared to him again. But not like this, oh, here's the mantra. Yes, he's dressed like a gopal, but at least he's talking like a sadhu, a sage. But if you want friendship, well, it's hard to have friendship with a guy like sitting up here on the seat. It's like problem. Sannyas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as much as it is a benediction for us, it was a problem for his friends. Going to treat you differently. You're going to wear a different color than everybody else. We have to keep a little bit distance, which is according to the Dharma, out of respect. It's a problem. So Brahma couldn't understand it at first, but yeah, I mean, the form of which Krishna appeared in and the way he conducted himself didn't lend to the full face of what friendship is about, which is really equality, equals. And in friendship, sometimes you serve your friend and sometimes your friend serves you. So have that type of intimate rapport with God, this is very different than the Greek, agape, so different than eros or any other type of love in this world. But Gaudiya Vaishnavism brings it full circle. Right? Anyway, he brought him to Vrindavan, right? He showed him his Gopavesh in full, fully engaging in friendship with his cowherd associates, in intimacy. Right? Instead of having his hand like this and blessing him, he had some rice and fruit in his left hand, and he was taking it out with his right hand and eating it and putting it in his friend's mouth. And if they were tasting something, they were taking out of their mouth. As soon as they tasted it, they said, oh, this is first class. I should give that to my other tongue, Krishna. They were one in this sense. My tongue, well, this is very good. I should give it to my other tongue, there, Krishna's tongue. This one is second best. I'll give it to my friend. This third best. I'll keep that. And everybody had different preferences. So everybody, one thought this was best and another thought that was best and so on and so forth. And Brahma comes in on the scene and he thinks, looks like that's an imposter. Looks like my guru, but my guru didn't act like that. He understood Sakshadhari Tena Samasta Shastra. All the scriptures say my guru is God himself. Kintu Prabodha Priyavata. However, he's also dear to God. How can you be God and be dear to God? It's confusing, but so he understood the first line from Vishnu Chakravartin's which gives great causes move back a little bit. I remember the first time Prabhupada was standing next to him as I used to in Los Angeles, and he was giving the class, and he said, "So, Guru is the incarnation of Krishna's mercy." Standing next to him. I mean, I knew it, but I hear him say it like that, and very powerful, filled the whole room up with kind of reverence, right? So Sakshad Hari Tvena Samasta Shastra, and it's echoed throughout all the scriptures, right? But Kintu, however, Kintu Prabhoya Priyavata, he is dear to Krishna. So he is God in a representational sense, but internally he is or she is a devotee of the Godhead also, in a particular type of devotee, in a particular bhava and so forth. So now he's from seeing Krishna, as described in the Bhagavatam, fully engaged in Sakya-rasa with his friends. And it's the second part of Vishnu's verse. He's coming in contact with them in a practical sense. I mean, obviously, he wasn't thinking of this verse, but the implication of the verse, right? Kintu Prabhoya Priyayatasya. He's seeing the bhav, Guru in terms of his bhava. And he's seeing this sthayi bhav of Sakya in this instance. He's seeing the Krishna as the object also of that love, as well as the friends who are the shelter of the love personified. He's seeing all the ingredients of Bhakti Rasa, of the Sakya variety. He's becoming acquainted with them. And of course, so he gets second and powerful installment of Siksha, if you will, to fortify his practice of chanting the mantra, which is what the practice is all about. Yeah. How much later did he get this kind of information? Like I said, he didn't get this probably on day one. The Guru says, "Oh, you got initiated. What did the Guru tell you? What is your swarup? What is your form in the spiritual world in relation to Krishna?" I don't know. My Guru didn't tell me. Ooh, problem. There's a problem. The problem is asking this question to begin with. This is not a question to ask. To begin with, to ask the question, it itself is demonstrative of a lack of adhikar for being preoccupied with the subject. If you're preoccupied with the subject, this is a higher end, obviously, of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. If talking about consciousness and the fact that you're not the body, to use like a mantra of Prabhupada, you're not that body, you're not that body. It's very powerful. It's very startling at the time. If this itself is a secret hidden in the Upanishads, what does the Gita say? Arjuna, Krishna tells Arjuna, Trigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistray Gunya Bavarjuna. Nirvana to Sattvastu Yoga Chema. He said, most of the Vedas are 3/4 of it at least is all dealing with what's out there and how to get it, giving you a license to take. You pay a fee, you can take. This is the karma mark. Pay a fee, sacrifice, you do this, you do it this way, and this way, and this way, and then you can get that through a magical sacrifice, mantra chanting, whatever may be the procedure, right? Interestingly, and as an aside, what you really get from this, when you want things and you think, these books are designed to show me how to get things, by honoring the macrocosmic features of nature that preside over wind, sun, water, and all the elements and so forth, and venerating them, loving them, then their secrets, how to get the things that they have. Sun god has a lot of light. The wind god has got a lot of wind, and so forth. So they think the idea is that there must be something behind that wind, something behind that light, right? As there's something behind all the movements of nature, of course, and it's consciousness, right? That must be a bigger manifestation of consciousness. I'm in charge. I feel it of my body, kind of. I think and then I do something, right? I think and I will and so forth. So this is kind of the practical thinking Hinduism. So again, worship of nature, and nature reveals the self ultimately, right? What happens is you follow these procedures and you get a wife, you get a husband, you get my son, daughter, new house, whatever. It's a whole nigama kalpataro galitam. You're so enamored with the tree of Vedic wisdom, which is kalpataro. It's a desire tree, and whatever you want, you can get from it. You know how to. What you really get by following it in a rudimentary sense, for the pursuance of things, if you will, is that you start to get faith in the text itself. This far exceeds whatever you might get from any particular sacrifice. Whatever extent you may have better weather, more sunny days, wind for your so whatever you get faith in the text itself. And so you look more deeply into the text, and if you go through it all, you find, there's a beginning, Purva Mimamsa, early dispensation for people who are on the trajectory of pursuing things, just to stop them. Stop. Don't pursue things. Stop thinking. That's your whole problem. And because you're thinking about things. Get them and think about them in this way, and so it's user-friendly, right? But as we get faith in this text, we look further, then we come to the secret, right? The self. Now, this is the point I'm making. If that is a secret, if the Upanishads are sealed for the ordinary person, and they speak only in a rudimentary way about the self and our spiritual prospect, in a beginning way, then how is it that the highest ideal is not something that should be kept a little private, a little secret? Narottam Thakur makes it very clear. If this starts to manifest, then keep it to yourself. Otherwise, it may go away. If there's a candle that starts to glow in your heart in terms of what your prospect is in relationship with Krishna, you have to guard it very carefully. The wind of any pride might blow it out. This will happen to an intermediate devotee in Nishta, in Ruchi, but there's still sadhakas So they could be subject to, people will say, in sadhana bhakti, the devotee becomes, well, everybody starts to like them. They become, let's say, they become likable, very likable. You know, that's if you experience that you're very likable, then that can give rise to some pride, right? And this has no place in bhakti. Trinada Pisanichena. So you have to guard that. We have to guard it, that's true, if the light comes. But at the same time, of course, we have to have the candle in there. And the candle has to be put in there. So we do need some instruction about it. But even the instruction about it, that's not for the beginning sector. So if someone says, oh, you just got initiated. What did Gurudev tell you? What is your Sarup? To ask the question means you don't have adhikar to even be in the conversation yourself. And who was the guru that gave you that? What really did you get? And what power do you have to do anything about it, with it? What is it causing you to do? Just ask such questions. It should cause you to do one of two things. Sit down forever. Or get up and go everywhere. And talk about it in such a way that others could take advantage of it, because it's a blessing that you have. You received a gift, a blessing. Of course, it's inside about your own nature, but still, it's come as a grace. So you feel grateful. And how will you respond to that? So there's two ways. You just sit down. And you become immovable. Bhajananandi or Goshtianandi, you get up and talk about it in ways that are appropriate, that people may approach it and come to it. And this is the work that is characterized our Bhakti-Vinod Parivar. Now, you haven't gotten that far. We're all the way back at Brahma, the beginning of the Sampradaya, right? So we said a little bit about Brahma. Yeah, he got initiated in yugas, and yugas later, he learned that he got Siddha Pranali. He doesn't even want to use the term. He got further insight into the implications of the mantra. Right? So from Brahma, we go to Madhva. Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. We come into historical time, and Madhvacharya was a great saint from, I can't remember the time, but quite some time back, right? Maybe 1,500 years ago. Brahma Madhva. Powerful Acharya, Madhvacharya. Some members of the Gaudiya community, they do not acknowledge the connection of our Sampradaya with Madhva, our Gaudiya Sampradaya with Madhva, or with Brahma for that matter. I think Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started the Sampradaya, he's Krishna. That's that. But Bhakti-Vinod Thakur following Kavi Karnapur, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev Vibhusan, some pretty worthwhile persons to follow in their texts. They have made a connection between the Gaudiya Sampradaya and Madhva Sampradaya. And Madhva is connected to the Brahma Sampradaya, so the connection is there. So we acknowledge that for good reason. But Madhva's teachings are different than the Gaudiyas, right? He has so many different teachings. But in his Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami says that among others, like Ramanuja and Sridhar Swami, we will draw upon Madhva, foremost Vaishnav in the south, from whose teachings he has made clear the position of bhakti. Says something to this effect. And he says that I am quoting many verses here that I don't have direct access to. The manuscripts are not available to me, but I'm finding them in Madhva's writings. I'm drawing on them. So he acknowledges there the connection to Madhva, and he mentions, I think, Vyasa, maybe, and other successors in the lineage from Madhva to Vyasa to he mentions 2 or 3 others, and they're who were major contributors in terms of literary contributions, acknowledging the succession of Madhva, and some borrowing from that, some connection with that, ways in which he has only emphasized, ways in which we connect with. But we differ from him in all these ways. These are the 10 ways that we differ from Madhva, and therefore we do have some differences. If we go a little further down the line to Baladev Vibhusan, then a couple hundred years later or so, then we find, well, he came from the Madhva Sampradaya to the Gaudiya Sampradaya, very strong connection. And his teaching is very much centered on 9, and I'll read them for you to help us appreciate this, tenets that are central to Madhva Sampradaya, that are shared by the Gaudiyas. Sri Madhva Mate Hari Paratamaha. He says, Baladev says, this is actually a verse from one of the famous acharyas in Madhva line. It lists 9 tenets, and Baladev Vibhusan cites it in his Prameya Ratnavali. And he said these are Madhva's points and these are Gaudiya points. We were together on this, so making the connection. Sri Madhva Mate, the opinion of Sri Madhva is Hari Paratamaha. Hari is the supreme God. Hari. Hari Bol. No, you say Hari. Hari Bol. Hari. Okay. Satyam Jagat Tatvato. And the Jagat, the world, is real. It's not an illusion, like Shankar says, it doesn't exist. It's not something that doesn't exist. It exists, it's just not what we think it is, not what it looks like on the surface. These are certain prominent points from up and right. Bedo Jiva Gana Hareya. There's a Jiva and it's different than Bhagwan. So there's the fire and then there are the sparks, right? Consciousness. And Anuchar Nichocha Bhavam Gata says further regarding the jivas that by nature, by their very nature, they're servants of Bhagavan. They exist for the very purpose of serving Bhagavan. That's their dharma, the Jaiva dharma, the jiva's dharma. It's not purposeless, not meaningless as the philosophy, prominent philosophy of materialism would like us to think. And furthermore, about the jivas, he says that they're distinct from one another. In terms of their gradation of attainment, and also in terms of their position in this world. Difference by karma, difference by bhakti, they're different. He says further, Muktir Nija Sukhanubhutir Amalu Bhakti Chatat Sadhanam. He says, Mukti is the apprehension of the inherent bliss of the Atma. Realizing the inherent bliss of the Atma that is attained by Amal Bhakti. Pure Bhakti. That is the sadhana. And 8, the 3 pramanas are pratyaksha, means what you perceive with your senses. You touch it, it's hot, it's hot. You know. Pramana means how evidence, how you know. I touched it, it's hot, I know. By sense perception. You can know things. Anuman, by inference, by reasoning. If there's smoke, there must be fire. I haven't seen the fire, but I've seen the smoke. So inference is also valid to an extent. And Shabda, ultimately, revelation, which trumps the other 2, but doesn't dismiss them entirely, right? And furthermore, the last point, Hari is known in all the scriptures. This is a whole book about these points that could be written. Prema Ratnavali does that to some extent, but we just cite them to emphasize the point here. that we have a real, as Gaudiya's connection with the Brahma, with the Madhva Sampradaya. We look to further evidence in the succession coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Does it begin with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Well, no, he had a guru too, right? Ishwar Puri, we heard about him the other night. He had a guru, Madhavendra Puri, and so forth. And we can trace in them out it was common at the time that thought that the Madhva branch had deputed some to preach in Bengal. Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri, they were prominent in Bengal. And in Bengal sector, they were considered to be members of the Madhva lineage. Now, someone might question, man, how can Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri be members of the Madhva Sampradaya when all the sannyasins are given the name Tirtha? Should have been Madhava Tirtha, should have been Ishwar Tirtha. Tirtha is one of the sannyas names, Puri is one of the sannyas names, but all of the members of the Madhva Sampradaya who are initiated in sannyas, they get the title Tirtha. Where's your connection with the Madhva? Well, now we start to segue into a very interesting notion of Guru Parampara, which is like this unbroken chain, right? Unbroken line that comes down one, another. But Puja Sridhar Maharaj very artfully and poetically said, it moves in a crooked way, like the Ganga coming down the Himalayas. What does he mean by that? This is a concept of Guru Parampara that was very much promoted by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the successor of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that some members of the Gaudiya community at large take exception to and wonder about. It's been named in different ways, like the Bhagavad Guru Parampara. And I've heard people say, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? I don't even know what it means. Well, I'll tell you what it means here, and it doesn't begin with Bhaktisiddhanta. It means in relation to the point I'm just raising, or the question that's raised by some. Well, if Madhavendra Puri is from the Madhva line, why is he named Puri? Because there are different ways to be connected with the Madhva line or any line. How is that? I might have got my Diksha here, well, I got my Siksha further over here. There are a number of members of the Shankar's Math, the monastery in Puri, the Govardhan Math. They have the charge of the Jagannath temple there. And in that particular, the four monasteries of Shankar, this one emphasizes bhakti, not as a goal, but as a way. Right? You should have to have some bhakti, and then that will help you get mukti. Of course, we reason if bhakti can give mukti, what's bhakti then? If I've got something I can give you, then I'm bigger than the thing itself. Mukti can't give bhakti, but bhakti can give mukti. So mukti must be inside of bhakti. But there are types of mukti in which there's no bhakti. Right? Or just a little to have gotten, I should say. There's no mukti without anyone. So anyway, members of that sampradaya, who was common at the time, Shankar was prominent, that someone would take sannyas from the Shankar lineage. What's an example in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time? Can anybody think of an example? Surely Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. He took initiation from Keshava Bharati, who was in the Shankar line. And Paramananda Puri, and there was 9 of them. Ishwar Puri, one of them, formed the roots of the metaphorical tree of love of God, described in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's rooted, that tree in which the fruits are praying, the branches are devotees reaching out, The roots are nivritti, not looking within rather than out for one's wealth, outside for one's wealth, right? So members of that moth, a very prominent one time was in charge of the whole monastery. He was the famous Sridhar Swami, commentator on the Bhagavatam, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had so much regard for. What happened to him was that he was initiated in that school, but he himself became attracted to bhakti, and coming out of the school, he wrote a commentary in the Bhagavatam that school could not relate to, but all the bhaktas could relate to and celebrate it, right? What to speak of this possibility occurring for Madhavendra Puri? I'm saying he was initiated in the Shankar line, affiliated with that moth, but the influence of bhakti through Siksha, right? This happened to all of the sannyasis in Mahaprabhu's association, other than, well, Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri, but Keshava Bharati is the prominent example. When he went to give the sannyas mantra to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu said, let me ask you, is this the mantra you're going to give me? Then he gave the mantra from a Vaishnava perspective. Keshava Bharati was illuminated. He said, yeah, that's the mantra. What kind of student are you? What I've received from you is more than I had to give. I take it back himself, right? So, so what to speak of Madhavendra Puri or Ishwar Puri or the Sridhar Swami? Madhva himself was initiated in the Advaitin line. He was a disciple of an Advaita. But when Advaita Acharya gave certain explanations, he could not tolerate them. After all, who's Madhva? That's another thing. Bhima, a friend of Krishna, if you like. One of the Pandavas. This is one way in which he also thought of as Vayu, and he related to Hanuman, but Bhima has this Sakyarasa for Krishna. So we find a little of this in Madhva Sampradaya also, hidden in the person of Madhva, the complicated theological person of Madhva. And Madhva rejected what he was being taught. He wrote his own commentary, which was rejected. So he took it to the mountain, right? He went to the Himalaya. This is the story, right? And there he met Vyasa, who's still there. You can't go there now because it's too close to China. The military won't let you in. There are reasons too that you won't find him there. Because the vision is internal. Anyway, he's said to have shared his commentary with Vyasa, the original commentator, right? And he approved of it. This is an article of faith in the Madhva Sampradaya, right? So Madhva has his own lineage like this. So what am I saying here? That we can answer to the argument, how can Madhavendra Puri be in connection with the Madhva Sampradaya? By Siksha. By Siksha. You may be connected to the Parampara by Diksha and or Siksha. Obviously, you're not going to get Diksha without Siksha. Diksha means initiation. You're not going to take initiation without having heard some instructions, advice, having seen an example, having had your faith captured. And then creating a problem for the preceptor. You've captured my faith, as Puja Prabhupada said, now I capture you. You have to give me the mantra. You have to share with me. You have to take me in. Right? So, and in Gaudiya Sampradaya, we have room for one Diksha Guru, but you can have more than one Diksha Guru. It depends how you interpret the term Diksha Guru, which has different interpretation, a very strict interpretation and a broader interpretation. In the broadest interpretation, we find in the Bhagavatam, where in 11th canto, the Avadut had so many gurus. The river was his guru. The bumblebee was his guru. The fig tree was his guru, so forth. He learned from all of them. He got his initiation, and then he saw his guru. Nature was speaking to him. Jiva Goswami says they were all his Siksha gurus, so in the broad sense, right? They were teaching him something, giving instructions. But he was able to draw instructions out of what they were doing. So we have a role to play in all this ourselves as disciples, right? So I'm giving some precedent for what we're ultimately getting to, which is the Gaudiya side of the Brahmamandal Gaudiya Sampradaya, and within that, our particular parivar, Bhakti-Vinod parivar. So, what do we mean by that? Because it's a little different. Is it Protestant, as some have proposed, or is it Catholic? Using the terms in a general sense, that is a question. So often thought as being Protestant, being a little against a little Lutheran, form. Because some people, or those who think like this, were the very cause for the dispensation of Bhakti-Vinod Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, negative impetus, I should say, the negative impetus for their whole mission, which we're all a product of. Misunderstanding Gaudiya Vaishnavism, misunderstanding details for principles, misconstruing details, thinking that they were principles, thinking that higher things weren't as high as they were, as we talked earlier. In our particular lineage, we're taught, as I've been speaking, to revere the higher aspects of the tradition, that they may reveal themselves to us, rather than we're going to go there with our shoes on and just grab it. No. I'll go into that a little bit here. I know we've all talked for a while, but it's some important topics. During the time of Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, the Sampradaya, Gaudiya Sampradaya, with its many different lineages coming from the Nityananda, Dvaita, Gadadhar, Rupa Goswami, as may be the case, Lokanath Goswami, and so forth, so many different streams, if you will, coming from the fountain of ecstasy and love of God that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personified. These currents, if you will, were over time becoming more lifeless, less vital. You could think, how could that be? Well, let us turn to the Bhagavad Gita, a very basic text. Evam parampara praptam imam raja sa kalena mahata yoganashta prantaka. Krishna's already answered the question. It says yoganashta prantaka. Oh, great warrior Arjuna, don't be worried about that. The nature of this succession, parampara, means one after another. That's what it means. One after another. So if you don't have one that comes after, or another that comes after the one, then you don't have the parampara. The solution to a problem in the parampara, for example, it losing some vitality by kalena, which is by time, by the influence of time in this world. The current is there, and sometimes it will recede, and sometimes it will come like a tidal wave, like in the form of my Guru Maharaj and the whole Bhakti-Vinod parivar. Sometimes it will recede, sometimes like a tidal wave, like Nityananda Prabhu, spreading it everywhere, and so forth, right? So this is just, he says, Krishna says, the influence of time. Yoga Nashta, the teaching becomes obscured. And maybe it's misrepresented even in the lineages. But throughout the world is is powerful. And while bhakti is easy and powerful, it's not so easy to apply oneself to it, right? Because we've been going in a very different direction with a lot of momentum for how long? Oh, a long time. Anadi, can't trace that out. So the time of Bhakti Vinod, Gaudiya Vaishnavism was not as vital as it had been in the past. And as a result, he himself had no interest in it. Here is a very educated and deeply religious person, Kedarnath, later dubbed Bhakti Vinod, Kedarnath Dutt. He was very central to the whole Hindu educated pious sector of Bengal and Calcutta, which is the capital of the British in India. All of modernity had completely come to India in Calcutta, West Bengal. It's not like the European insights and so forth about life, its purpose, its meaning, and whatnot. Science was unknown. When, for example, the Copernican revolution took place in Europe, and it was determined that the Earth is moving around the sun rather than the sun moving around the Earth, rather than a Earth-centric to a sun-centric perspective. I mean, that was huge, right? It's a huge, huge event in human history. It's made out to be more than it's worth, though, because whether you have a heliocentric or Earth-centric perspective, it doesn't make that much difference. It's what you do, you do on Earth, right? Anyway, Earth shaking, and meanwhile in India, the traditionalists, they all had a Puranic perspective, which was different than the heliocentric perspective. So some had to deal with it, some ignored it, some had to deal with it, some started to compromise. And at the time when this was going on, it was notable, or it has been noted by scholars, that the Vrindavan Goswamis didn't pay any attention to it. They didn't, and I would reason, they didn't have time for it. Because while this whole controversy was going on, is the Earth moving around the sun, or is the sun moving around the Earth? Our Puranas seem to say one thing, and then these people are saying the opposite thing, and they got measurements to prove it, and so forth. But does the Purana really say that? That's another thing. Anyway, so this was going on, right? But the Goswamis were busy at the time in Vrindavan with other things. They were busy with the whole world, the sun included, is moving around the Atma. The Atma is moving around the Paramatma. The Paramatma is moving around Krishna. And Krishna is circumambulating Radha with great reverence. And this is what we're trying to tell people. Well, we don't have time to, deal with this Copernican revolution. We're involved in the revolution of our own, and the revolutions are getting higher and higher, going round and round. And we're trying to teach people that the Gramya Katha, the gossip of Braj, is a solution to the whole problem of Prajalpa, of gossip in the world, right? And it's meaningless chit chat, so forth. Anyway, so but by the time of Bhakti Vinod, the point is, you couldn't escape dealing with modern European conceptions. They set up a capital there in India, in Calcutta. So there was a think tank and educated people. Rabindranath Tagore, who won the Nobel Prize, who had exchange with Einstein. So it was one of the people who came and recited his poetry for Bhakti Vinod. After Bhakti Vinod had become a Vaishnav. And Bhakti Siddhanta was in the presence. They appreciated some of his songs and so forth. A big person. So I'm just saying Bhakti Vinod was a prominent person. If, as we should, we understand the history of Bengal to be two periods, pre-Chaitanya and post-Chaitanya. That is West Bengal. How significant Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. Pre-Chaitanya and post-Chaitanya. And there is no, as important as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, there is no person who is more important in modern times, in post-Chaitanya West Bengal, in terms of what Gaudiya Vaishnavism than Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I mean, you just cannot, it's mind-boggling how prominent and important he was. And the amount of literature that he put out, what he did for Navadvip Dham to excavate the places of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, like the Goswamis did in Vrindavan, under the direction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I mean, it's just incredible what he did. But the point I'm making is that he wasn't a Vaishnava. He wasn't interested in all this Gaudiya stuff, which tells us that it wasn't really vital in Bengal. Comparatively, I'm just saying comparatively, compared to previous times, some of its vitality had been taken out and it was misrepresented. And so educated, pious people were turning away from it. And maybe reinterpreting the Krishna of the Srimad Bhagavatam to, like, let's take him out of the Bhagavatam, just keep him on that chariot and Bhagavad Gita there, where he sounds more like, like a sage rather than a playboy. Europeans, it's not working for them. And they got reasoning, and it doesn't sound very good, does it? Right? So these are kind of problems that were being presented by the Western, European, modern, Victorian, British perspective, that many people began to shrink as a result away from the core Gaudiya Vaishnavism and the central book of the whole Sampradaya, the Bhagavad. Sure, there were some sadhus and badhus here and there, and they're out back somewhere, hard to find. They just stayed in the Dham, which is advisable. Rupa Goswami advised it, right? One of the most powerful angas of bhakti, live in the Dham, in fact, is bhakti. Go to Calcutta, at the kingdom of Maya, right? So they stayed there. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went everywhere. They preached. That's your Gostiananda, right? But the Sampradaya was not active in that way. And then, for that matter, even in the Dham, in the sacred realms of Gaudiya Vaishnava, Jagannath Puri, Vrindavan, Navadvip, the most visible form of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was not compelling to educated people. And ultimately, Bhakti came to the conclusion that when he converted to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, when he began to see the Bhagavad through the eyes of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, then he centered on what the teachings were really about and identified why it was not vital, because it was being misrepresented in so many ways. So many rules were given. You have to take initiation here, because I come from a family of Nityananda Prabhu, or maybe the case. And you have to get a letter from me that says you initiated it, and it has to be so that you have to get the Siddha Pranali from me, and if you want to know, if you want a Swarup and Golok, you have to come and be my disciple here. And then they would get a support from this. It became a little bit of a business transaction, selling Swarups, the marketing Swarups for uneducated people. But Bhakti Vinod was an educated person. And this was turning him off. But when he actually, so he didn't, wasn't interested in their books. But when he came across Chaitanya Charitamrita and read it for himself, well, he had a different understanding than their understanding. And this is the beginning of what we call the Bhakti Parivar. He took initiation in the Nityananda Parivar, coming from the line of Janava, who became prominent after the passing of Nityananda, her line. While he took initiation in that line from Bipin Bihari Goswami, there were things about Bipin Bihari Goswami that were a little troublesome to him. And people would complain because they had much appreciation for Bhakti Vinod, what he was doing. It was extraordinary. In the midst of fathering like 12 or 14 children, he wrote over 100 books about the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. In the midst of having a job as a magistrate in the British government, all of his spare time into the night and early morning hours, writing and making arrangements to protect pilgrims and disseminate Gaudiya Vaishnavism and so forth. Very extraordinary example, anyway. So powerful person, educated person, and he, yes, he took initiation with Bipin Bihari Goswami throughout his texts. He respects Bipin Bihari Goswami, but people complained. This is right there in the biographical notes of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur of his early days with Bhakti Vinod Thakur when they were living with Bipin Bihari Goswami. And some people would come and complain to Bhakti Vinod that why the guru is to eat tobacco and pan and these things that are typically not, small things, but, and so Bhakti Vinod says, yes, I hope he will give that up. Continue to respect his guru, but hope he will give that up. So this is just one example. There are other examples that caused Bhakti Siddhanta to think we are finding something in Bhakti Vinod that is not in Bipin Bihari Goswami. Therefore, although he's come in this lineage, he respects Bipin Bihari Goswami fully. He is himself a very extraordinary spiritual figure. And as time went forward, the relationship between Bipin Bihari Goswami and Bhakti Vinod Thakur became a little more distant, and Jagannath Das Babaji became more prominent. And there's so much historical evidence to this effect. And Jagannath Das Babaji, well, let's put it like this: he didn't chew tobacco. He was not from the largely visible, formal world of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which were the householder families, Brahmins, caste Goswamis, who were giving form and shape to what it means to be initiated, a guru, and all the things they did were good. They were good things, but those things were relative. How did we begin our talk? What did we find? Did it say there you have to have a Diksha Patra? That will be the part of initiation. You'll have to be told what your swarup is in Goloka in order to be initiated. None of those things were included, right? Hari Bhakti Vilas. You can't get many more original than that as to what initiation means, right? The imparting of the mantra, and everything is there in the Gopal mantra. We read Hari Bhakti Vilas, what it says about the Shringa mantra, this mantra, that, and then Gopal mantra, the 18-syllable mantra. It's the central Diksha mantra of our Sampradaya. That was what we started with, right? The Brahma received from Krishna. Everything in there. And of course, the name of Krishna. The mantra is made up of names of Krishna. Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana Bhavavaya. To give yourself. Right? So Bhakti Vinod Thakur himself is an example of what Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur talked about when he spoke about his conception of the Guru Parampara, that somebody think, what is that? What Guru Parampara? We've heard of such a thing. That it moves in a crooked way like this, as Sridhar said. Yes. So he took his initiation from the Nityananda Parivar, one of the Parivars of Nityananda Prabhu, and from Tripurari Goswami. But some distance was created at a certain point, and it was made up for in terms of Guru Parampara and the connection through the Siksha of Jagannath Das Babaji, who was also a member of another line in the Nityananda Parivar. And he advised his son, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to take initiation from Gaura Das Babaji, another avadut, out of the world figure who gave initiation and didn't give him a letter, didn't give him a list of who everybody is in your line and so forth. And he was coming from the Advaita Parivar. I heard someone say the other day, well, Jagannath Das Babaji is from the Nityananda Parivar. They wear a certain tilak like this, like Nityananda. Gaura Kishore is from the Advaita Parivar. He wears the Advaita tilak. They're going to different places in Nityananda Dweep and Goloka. They don't, you follow the one, you go to that place. You don't interact with that guy over there. I mean, this is like, this is just like kind of insanity, if you will. Right? He's trying to dismiss the idea that, well, you can have a substantial connection. You might be initiated in this line, you could have a substantial connection with another in another line. If you, there aren't such rules that prohibit the sadhu's extending his mercy and grace, or a sadhu being who he or she is, that it is an embodiment of something that they exude bliss that is extended out just by their very presence, right? Creating bhakti samskars. You can't make a rule, stop that, right? No. So this is a real thing. If you can have a real and substantial connection to the sampradaya, which is an unbroken chain of, we would say, cyclic succession through diksha. We don't dismiss the diksha, we're emphasizing it, right? As much as more than anybody. But the fact that it will be strengthened by siksha, that may come from another figure. Typically, it doesn't. Our diksha guru is our siksha guru, Vas. But these days, of course, things are different. People are mingling many different groups, and so there's a lot of overlay and so on, and that's good. Yeah, it's good. So this was, in brief, something about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's idea when he said, here's my line, it goes like this, and he mentions all these prominent persons in the line who aren't necessarily connected to one another by diksha. Sridhar said, yes, if you want to look at science and you want to list the great contributions of science over 1,000 years, as we could go back to that, well, a few hundred years anyway, a few hundred years, modern science, right? Then we're not going to list every scientist. We have to list, well, Newton, let's put him in the list, and he had many people around him, in between him, from Newton, we come to Einstein. Okay, there's another one. Then we'll draw another one to, who's the guy that died? Anyway. Yeah, here's one. Yeah, and others. I was thinking of someone else. Yeah. So you can't list them all. That doesn't mean to disrespect them, but weight is thought, right? The anti-party, if you will. You have to have a list of all your gurus in the line, who they are in the spiritual world. Well, that list is going to turn into a book in 10,000 years. How many names are there going to be? It's a little impractical. Right? So, Bhaktisiddhanta drew his line like this. We see this the teaching, as Prabhupada said once, that if you take a leaf from one tree over here, it's fallen, and you taste it, and you're in a distant place and you find a leaf, it's not related to the tree, but it's on the ground, looks the same, but it tastes the same, you know it came from the same tree. If it tastes the same, you know it came from the same tree. When I met Sridhar Maharaj, I knew it's the same tree. This is the same tree. I was very capable of convincing people of things. A little bit of a knack for that. And I'm a very independent person also. Nobody can control me. I'm a very independent-minded person. But Prabhupada completely controlled me. So I was used to being able to turn people's heads, even before I met Prabhupada, and within Prabhupada's mission, I was very, very good at that. In a positive way, with the teachings and so forth, right? But Prabhupada was constantly turning my head with this purport or that statement or this analogy, right? So it was quite startling to me when Prabhupada left and I came under the shelter of Sridhar Maharaj, because I felt no one can do this. My experience is no one's been able to do this but Prabhupada. He's turned me like this. So I know this is from the same tree. Of course, there were obvious reasons to think that, aside from that formally, and so, but some people were questioning that, right? Yes, the same teaching, Siksha Guru. So I have the same experience. Right? So in our parampara, we get Prabhupada and Puja Sridhar Maharaj, both strong current of Sakyaras and Madhurya Rasa also, right? And this is a very practical reality. We see it in the life of Bhakti Vinod Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur picked up on that. He took initiation with Gorkashore Das Babaji, and Babaji was not except by one of the caste Goswamis. He didn't have a whole setup, disciples to maintain him, and he was restored. So if you want to criticize Bhaktisiddhanta for not getting a Diksha Patra, talk to Gorkashore. He didn't give that. He said, you will realize your swarup in the syllables of the Hare Krishna mantra. That's what he told him. He may have told us some other things too, but that is the main thing that Bhaktisiddhanta shared with us. And therefore he put emphasis, as it should be, on Hari Kirtan, which is the whole central focus of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching by his example, by which all these the wealth, the prem, Goloka, Premodhan, Harinam Sankirtan. I mean, can't get it's very simple poem from Naratan. The dhan, the wealth of Goloka, which is its prem, has been exported to this world through Nam Sankirtan. Goloka, Premodhan, Harinam Sankirtan. So we take up the chanting, focus on Nam. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his poem K, what is it? Vaishnav K. Who is a Vaishnav? He sat down, chanted 1 billion names. Took about 8 or 10 years, something like that, to complete that vow. And afterwards, he got up and wrote this song. Vaishnav K. Who is a Vaishnav? Oh, my dear mine, what kind of Vaishnav are you? He said. Sitting in a secluded place, pretending to be Haridas Thakur. You have such adhikar, but you're thinking of this and that and so forth. He said, Kirtana Prabhavi Smarana Swabhave. Get up, do Kirtan. And by the power of Kirtan, Smarana will come naturally. The heart will be cleansed, and the capacity, meditation is not something, I think I'll sit and meditate. It's not like really quite like that. It's not something you think about, meditation. It's just not thinking. It requires a pure heart, because if your heart's full of desires, then you can't sit for very long, right? You have to get up, chase after them, so forth. So by the power of Kirtan. So he therefore organized this campaign for worldwide dissemination. Bhakti Vinod he couldn't ignore modernity like the Goswamis could. He was right at his doorstep, right? capital of the British. So they're such a powerful person, influential person. He took the Gaudiya Vaishnavism and the interface with the modern world and sent Gaudiya Vaishnavism all over the world. As Puja said, the idea came in Bhakti, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave it some shape. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada took it all over the world. And here we all are today. And I'm very fortunate to be in your company, keeping me busy with all these things. I can possibly go in another direction, but not possibly deviate by the force of your friendliness. Somebody said to me, one of my disciples, happy Guru Puja. I said, it's happy because I have disciples like you, all of you. Gol Premanande. Bhakti Parivar ki Jai. Ram Govinda ki Jai. Radha Madan Gopal ki Jai. Gol Premanande. What's next?
We're gonna have Puja now. So everybody can, we have flower. We're gonna stand up, yes.